This particular chapter allows you to write your front-end application. In this case, we are using Java, and then connect it to the back-end database. Now, in class, what we do is we just do a very general connection with the database, but you can really take this one to the next level and create more complicated data and then insert some more data, and you can even try to do it with a GUI statement. But again, I gave you all the basics of the I guess the individual tools that you can use to create a more complicated program. And for your final project, I wanted you to go back and use any of those templates and modify it according to your need, given all these individual tool sets. So, some of it is also kind of left, I deliberately left it out for you all to be able to figure things out, because as you saw last time, in our classroom, we were encountering a different kind of an error that I have not seen before. With the SQL driver download, they have kind of moved things around, and I cannot find that jar file anymore. So let me go over some of the key topics here. So we talked about a database, which is nothing but a organized collection of data. Now, when we say an organized collection, it does not get created by itself. As you saw in your program, you have to create that database. You come up with a name, and then the tables that you create inside should be logically related. And we are referring to the relational database, where we have tables that we keep our information in a logical way. The way you actually logically design the table is actually a matter of a different class, where we understand how to not put everything in one table. That's why you need to create separate individual tables with a logical relationship between the 2 or 3 or 4, however many tables that you have, and they're all connected by keys, primary keys and foreign keys, and then that would allow you to extract some values or the data that you have inputted in there from those tables. All of these things are actually done by a layer of a software that kind of sits above that database, and that's called our database management system. So we, for our purposes, if we have downloaded our MySQL, our database management system is our workbench. It's a GUI interface, or there's a command line prompt that you are interacting with to reach out to that database. You do not, they don't let you go directly to the database. You have to go through that layer of software in between. The language that we use is called the SQL language. That's basically that statement of create table, or show databases, or insert values, or select such and such table from such and such column from such and such table. Sometimes it can get more complicated as to where you add a criteria, where I'm looking for people with the last name Paul, or people with a birth date ranging from this date to that date. So depending upon what is it that you're doing, you can write more complicated SQL statements, which would allow you to extract the data from those tables that you have put together in that bigger database. And database, that's why I kind of use it as an analogy as a big folder, and the tables inside are individual files. Now, for us to be able to connect for any language that you are using, it could be Java, it could be C#, it could be Visual Basic, or any language that you use, for you to connect to the database, you would need those software drivers. And generally, those are downloadable drivers that they are offering, or they offer, and you just have to download and point to the right driver so that you can connect to the database. And there are some updates on these things. So, it gives you, the book kind of gives you some of the more updated ones. But, those are the things that you have actually found. This is now going into the inside of a table. So this is the one that I referred to earlier, relational database. It's a logical representation of data that allows you to be accessed without consideration of its physical structure. And again, as I said, for our purpose in this class, we're not going to get too much into it. We're just going to look at a table by itself, and these are the ones that I was referring to you as files. So you have your rows, those are the horizontal rows, and your columns are the vertical ones. So in this case, you can see that I have a table with 5 attributes. So I have a number, name, department, salary, and location, and then I will insert these values, and I also would have one attribute or one column as a primary key, and the primary key basically would allow you to identify that entire record. And when I say a record, is one row all the way from the left to the right. So it will allow that one record to be identified uniquely by this number, and that would be the one that I'm going to refer to as a primary key. Okay, so that's what we have over here. So if you see a table, and if you know that that particular primary key, in this case a number is the primary key, you should never have a duplication of the number 23603 in that table anywhere. Okay, so that's what your primary key is going to be. So now I can select any kind of data subsets from here. So I can go to see which department it belongs to, or what kind of salary do I have. And of course, this one only has about 5 or 6 records. But in general, when we are talking about databases and tables, we are talking about hundreds and thousands, sometimes if not millions of records that we have to deal with. And that's why it's important to know all the attributes and the primary key. Now, you also might see that the primary key is included in another table, and in that case, it will be referred to as a foreign key, and they use that for connecting them together. So a few more terms over here. They kind of explained the table, and they talked about how, and again, those are all features of the table. You can actually select it where it's an auto increment, where in that case you can use that as an index key. The number would never be repeated. And again, that again goes a little bit more into the database features. So if you use a certain database, and these databases are sometimes could be proprietary database, or sometimes could be free databases. So if you think that I would use an author ID to be an auto increment, so I don't have to type the number as soon as I start it off, or define author ID as an auto increment number, it would immediately keep on adding a number to it. Now, the way it works is if you happen to delete one of these tables, this number should never be repeated again. So you would not see a 2, you will go to 3, 4, 5, and 6. So anytime you delete a number, you cannot use that anymore. It's a different discussion as to if that's a good practice or not, or should you go with a primary key of your own setting. It's a different thing, different issue, but sometimes you also see that as well. And these are more of these tables that they're talking about, and ISBN, title, edition number, and again, this kind of goes into a little bit of the logical design. When you are creating these tables, you have to keep them separate, and if you do not have them separated, then it becomes very difficult to extract that information out of it. If you create one big spreadsheet with multiple columns which do not have any relationship with each other, to extract certain records with certain criteria, it becomes very, very difficult, and that's why you need to create a logical design. The next thing it is showing is your entity relationship diagram. This is basically a cardinality showing that you have 3 tables here: authors, ISBN, and titles. And these little symbols that you see are cardinality symbols, which says that you have a one-to-many relationship. So each author, can have multiple ISBN numbers. So as you can see, you have an author with an author ID, and author ID is the primary key over here. But author ISBN, you actually have 2 keys to be your primary key. And then you also have another table over here, which is called titles. So if you really take that middle table out, if you look at it, the authors and the titles, it's a many-to-many relationship. So basically it says each author can have many titles, and then many titles, or each title can be written by many authors. Okay, so it's a many-to-many relationship between authors and titles, because as one author you can write multiple titles, and those titles are going to be tied with your author ID. Okay, and that's why you want to break it down into a middle table over here, which is your author ISBN, so that you can have a one-to-many relationship between author and ISBN and title and ISBN. It's a very, very common practice that you would see with databases, where you do not want to leave a many-to-many relationship. That way it's very difficult to extract the records there. So that's why you want to break it down. Okay. This is the basic SQL that we were talking about. For our purposes, we really need simple things like showing databases, using databases, showing tables, describe a table, create a table, insert some values, select some values out of the table with some where clauses. So we really want to keep this thing in a simple mode. And then also you have your updates and deletes, and for our purpose we probably would not need it. But again, you can do, use group by if you have a lot of information and you want to group them in an ascending order, by a descending order. You should be able to do that as well. So these are all the SQL keywords that we have, and these are some of the basic select queries. Again, for our purposes, the examples that I have used, and also the book gives you more examples. So if any of you guys run into SQL errors when you run your Java program, you should be able to come and refer to some of these reference or examples and should be able to correct them. The where clause, this is the one where you are actually specifying a particular criteria. It also gives you a little more advanced SQL about the pattern matching. So those are your, this percentage is, you can use just like your math parameters, you can use all these operators: less than, greater than, less than equal to, greater than equal to, not equal. And then you also have your characters, your percent character. These are your wildcard characters. So if you're trying to, if you do not quite know what is the last name of the author, I'm saying where last name like D percent. So anybody with starting with a D, and it could be dot to detail to Detrick. So everybody with a D would be listed at this point because you said D and a wildcard of percentage. So very, very common thing that you'd find in SQL queries. Again, they don't quite remember the name, the first name, but they know that they have and that's why they left it as underscore, but then they know that they have an O at some point in their last name, and again the rest of them they do not know, so they use a percent. So these are all basically ways of trying to find out information if you do not have the exact information from the table. These are all your order by clause. There are order by, group by, last name, first name, ascending, descending, everything that you can do. The next part kind of takes you a little more into joining. Sometimes you may have to query some tables where you are selecting information from one table, but you want to join with another table and only pick out 2 columns from that particular table. So you can set up your join here, and really the way you do your join is you say from author. So these are the columns, so first name, last name, and ISBN. And the table is from authors, and then you do an inner join with an author ISBN table on, and they say the criteria for join is the author ID of authors and the author ID of your author ISBN. So that's pretty simple, and then order by last name and first name. So in that case, instead of having to create a table where you would actually copy the information, you're actually selecting 2 tables and then joining on a particular criteria. So here you can see they actually pulled up quite a few things from 2 tables. This is what you would need for your purpose. So the general format of writing an insert statement is insert into the table name and then your column name. one thing I would say is make sure that your sequence is correct. So basically, when you say column name 1, values value 1, so value 1 goes to column 1, value 2 goes to column 2, value n goes to column n. So the sequence is important. Or you know, if you write the attributes in a particular sequence, the value should also be written in the same sequence. Otherwise, it's going to go into the wrong place. So once you're done, this is the kind of table that would be created. You can update your statement. That kind of gets into the functioning of the tables, because remember, whenever you're updating things, especially in a program where it is used by multiple people, it's very important that the entire transaction gets completed with that one statement. So not only do you insert the value, but then you would also go back and update the table so that the other tables are also updated, because you do not want the other people who are simultaneously using the table to have the wrong value. Again, there's a whole, there's a whole concept of how those transactions are happening depending upon what kind of database you choose, but they're a little more complicated. But the real simple concept is you want your data to be always in sequence. So the process is not just one thing that you insert the value, but there are multiple commands that you run, so that as soon as you input, you commit, update everything, and if the commit statement is not executed, the data actually rolls back, so the table never gets updated or the values never get inserted. And again, this is just to counter, or this is just to make sure that all the data in those tables are in the right sequence and they're updated all at the same time for multiple people using the data. All right, so this is your Java database, and this is the part that they kind of explain how to do the installation. Again, we have done all that, and we have used either MySQL or WAMP server. Again, they give you more options. If you want to try any one of those, it's fine, but we are pretty good with what we had done. So this is the connection, and again, different books or different programs, you will see different ways of writing it, but really it is all about identifying which database you're using, and the way you do it is with a path name, and then you need to give them the information so that you can get in there. So in order for you to build that connection, you have to include the driver, and then you have to include the user, and in our case we have been using root. But if you downloaded your databases and you created a user for yourself, that's the information that you would need. We do not actually recommend that people keep it at root, because that's a basic admin level access to it. So every time you download a database, you should create your own user and you should create your own password, and that's the information that you want to include in your program. So basic information like the driver manager, get connection, and then the database URL. And in this case, we have used the database URL. In this case, it is this. Again, if you try to imitate the same thing in your computer, you have to make sure that they are all set up correctly. Otherwise, it will not work. The one that we did was the driver with the MySQL that we did. So use that one. But other things are pretty set. This is your create statement. So connection.create statement. And then if you want to execute the query, so this is your select query, and you're saving it in a result set. And then with your result set, you can also write your for statement, where they would go to the result set and pick out individual records from there. Because remember, it does not do it all at the same time. You have to go through the record set and say, okay, have I reached the end of my record? If yes, then I would stop. But if not, then I would go to the next line, again, print it out, go to the next line, again, print it out. So this is how they have been written. And they're all included with a try-catch statement. And the book has written it a little differently. The way that we had written it is a little different. Either way is absolutely okay, no problem. Whatever style you want to choose. Just make sure that you understand, what is it that you're doing. so that if you run into any errors, you know how to go back and troubleshoot it. This is actually talking about, first of all, it creates the statement for executing the queries, then the command to execute the query. That's the execute query method that they're using. Again, remember, this is all coming from your classes and objects. Once you bring in all those classes, you can continue to use your methods for those classes. So that's why you have to import quite a few of those classes at the very top. The book database, so adding more code to it. And as I said, you can use this code or the code that we have used in the lectures. I think those were a little simple in the lectures, and I've given you the templates for that, so should be good with that. Okay, now this is that GUI part that they were talking about. So if you look at it, they actually created in their code some GUI part which will give you something like this. Okay, so basically the filters that you can choose, so basically it shows you that if you select, if this is your statement that you have created, select asterisk from authors. If you click on submit query, then it's going to come up or create a table like this. But then you can actually also add a filter to it. So if I want that, I want only things with last name detail, I can apply the filter and run it, and then it will give me a little more. So here, this is your query results. This is submit query. Then you can apply your filter. So again, more of the GUI application that they have used. And that's why I said earlier that, for our purposes, I give you some of the basics, and then it's completely up to you if you want to use it, according to your need for the program. The book has the information. In my example, I have not used the GUI. I just left it as the simple connection, insert and delete. And again, more codes, more of these examples there. So again, feel free to go back and use any one of those templates and add some more database and change the data. If you want to come up with a format like this, again, you have the template with the books. It's important that you understand the code, because you've got to translate the information from that code into something like this. All right. The book also gets into the stored procedures. We really haven't gone into it, but it's basically a more complex way of writing your SQLs. This is the part they were that I was referring earlier about the processing. So they show you the transaction processing, and they also describe what it means. So the transaction processing basically allows a program to interact with the database, to treat a database operation as a single operation. Remember, I was telling you about when you say insert a statement, it is not one. There are more statements that you have to write so that, once it gets committed, the entire database gets updated. So this is what they're referring to, that if it does not get committed, then it rolls back and the database never gets updated. So it's important to understand the concept that, when you write that insert, it has a few more steps that also goes with it. And I think that pretty much wraps up the chapter. There's only this one chapter here. It gives you a little summary, and I think as far as the quizzes go, I do have a quiz on this particular chapter, so that's why I kind of wanted to go over some of the contents. Now, here is your, so if I go back to your 14-week, even though, here is my assignment. Remember, I told you earlier that sometimes I had done a separate assignment with only the connection, and then a separate assignment where I have you guys insert some data and then do a result set. But in this case, I just created one. I gave you the information. I told you that you can wait, because if you look at the deadline, it's kind of delayed. So you can actually use the individual codes that I have given you, where you have a connection, you have your inserting, and then you have your table and then displaying the values, so that could be all incorporated into the assignment 11. The next week, which is your final week, and remember I told you that I'm not going to give you any more assignment. What I'm having you do is a capstone project. So if you look at the capstone project, I've created a video for it, but what I really want you to do is I want you to write 2 programs. One would be a console output project, and the other one would be a Java FX project. Okay, and what I want you to do in these projects is you need to make sure that you actually use these concepts that I have listed over here. Okay, so I want you to have user interactivity, which means, remember in the first case, you should be able to input some values. It should not be hard-coded. I want you to use classes and objects. I want you to use arrays, methods, decision statements, detail, comments. Everything that you write has to have good comments. And I've seen people write it both ways. Sometimes they would use comments after every line, or sometimes they would have a heading with 2 or 3 lines of explaining as to what they're doing in the next section, and then go to the next one. Now, sometimes I've seen some people write 1 line of comment, and you're not going to get your full point if you give me that, because I really stressed on this that I want you to write detailed comments. Okay, loops, Java GUI component for your event-driven programming. So I want you to use these things in your programs, and of course, the purpose of doing this is to make sure that we have, or you have, a good understanding of all the major learning outcomes that we had stated in our syllabus at the very beginning, right? Remember, we said after we finish the course, the students would be able to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So these are all the things that you should be able to use in these 2 programs. Okay, and you can go back and use any template, but as I said over here, you can use any of the projects that you have done in the past as templates, but it cannot be the same program. Please describe in detail under reflection what are the major changes you have made from the existing template program. Okay, so I'll give you an example. Let's say for my GUI Java FX project, somebody wants to remember that program template that you had where you had a list of books, and then if you click on it, it showed the books. Now you can use the same template and come up with a country with all the maps, and maybe have a picture of the author or whoever you're using as, if you are the programmer, you can create a template where you have a picture showing of you, which does not change, but then as they step through the countries, the flag changes. So you write me a detailed comment about what are the changes that you have made from your earlier program. I've used this program template from the book where I had the books are showing up. I've changed this thing to display such and such things. I've seen people do, they kind of want to do a list of items that they want to put for sale. So they'll have 5 or 6 things, and as soon as they click on it, a picture comes up, maybe with the price in there. Just take anything and utilize that template and tell me in detail the changes that you have made. Now, I really want you to pay attention to these rubrics. Okay, tell me what the program is doing. Do not just give me program and just give me some screenshots. Tell me, describe to me what the program is doing. Program code written with detailed comments. Assessment and reflection and detail. Again, this should not be a surprise, considering some of you guys who came to the database, to the advisory committee where they talked so much about, tell us what is it that you had done. This is really the way you should be able to document everything. Okay, even if it is hosting something in a public domain with a screen capture of, for our first program, this is what I had done, this is what it's doing. That is also absolutely okay for showing as a portfolio. That is something that we kept on mentioning you earlier, but I wanted to stress on this time that this is where you write your detail using technical terms and correct grammar. Include RAND program screenshot in your reflection document. Again, the reason for doing it is, again, if you're going for an interview, you never know what kind of settings you have. So if I can go to a public domain, as long as you have an internet connection on your phone even, you can pull it up and say, okay, this is what we had done, and it's almost like flipping through a book. So these are all screenshots with detailed information in there showing what, and again, they don't want to see every single one. You pick one and you talk about it. This is the one that we did as a final capstone project where I did this and this. We used a template. This is the entire write-up that I had done. That's really what they are looking for. So this is the rubric for each program. So as you see over here, you have the first one, output project, has 50 points. The second one, FX projects, has 50 points. Make sure you give me enough of this, okay? So this presentation is really, really important. I'm not going to have any new projects. As I said, you did your assignment 11. From here on, the next 2 weeks, this is what you are working on, okay? Any question? Again, I've created a video, but I again explained what I would want for your final project.